Sure.
All right. 2 episodes in a row.
Yes.
We're knocking it down. We're making it a habit, which ironically, as you might have guessed, is what I want to talk a little bit about today. So for some context, for those of you watching, the surroundings are a little bit different. We're no longer in mum's garage, and not just being able to kind of get back into our own house, but we've had some really good news here in Melbourne that we're on track for things reopening up. I think we've right now, within the last 10 minutes, officially hit 70% double vaccination rate. So the world is starting to open back up. Gyms here will reopen at 80%, which I think at the moment we're still saying first Friday of November, although we are ahead of schedule with the reopening. So hopefully that we open up a little bit faster on that front as well. But what's been a conversation that we've had over the last 6 lockdowns or 18 months here in Melbourne is how to get back on the wagon. So what we tend to find a lot that's been happening is we've gone into lockdowns, and the more we've had to do lockdowns, the less, generally speaking, we've been able to do each lockdown, right? The motivation starts to wane, the weather turned, it's cold outside, you're not training with your buddies, your community's closed. There's only so many online Zoom classes that you really want to attend before you just kind of have that just fuck it moment, right? So with things opening up, that's what I want to talk to you today about is some practical tools that we can use or some takeaways on how to get started, COVID notwithstanding, even if it's just been 5 or 10 years since you've had any kind of real intentional physical activity, if you're postpartum and coming back, whatever it might be, if you've taken a long time off health, nutrition, training, I want to hear some of Coach Kat's perspectives on how to get back into training.
Yeah, look, I think for me, probably having gone through the postpartum experience quite recently lends itself well to this. And what I see a lot of my clients doing, and what I was really cognizant when I was trying to kind of get back into things, was choosing small and achievable goals. It's so easy to want to go hot out the gates. We're very much all or nothing by nature, many of us. And so choosing 1 or 2 things to focus on at a time. Once we're nailing those consistently, then piling on another 1 or 2 and a 1 or 2 or 1 or 2, and all of a sudden things are going to look completely different, but it's going to be done in a much more sustainable manner. Too often what we see is I'm going to eat super clean, nothing but veggies and lean proteins and drink 5 liters of water a day, and I'm going to exercise 6 times a week and sleep 8 hours a night. And we set these really drastic and really difficult scenarios for ourselves. And so when one of those blocks starts to fall, it's kind of, again, that all or nothing, everything goes out the window.
Yeah.
So we're much better off saying, all right, well, I haven't really been doing much. I've been sitting on the couch this last lockdown. So I'm just going to start by training 2 days a week.
Yeah.
Getting back into the gym and starting there.
That's I guess a similar conversation that we have with clients generally, is that too much change all at once is not helpful. It's overwhelming, right? And I think you forget, and we talk a lot about the fundamentals, but if you've really been doing nothing, then simply just starting to go for a walk on a more regular basis, that actually is quite a big change relative to what you've been doing.
Yeah, and you're setting yourself up for success rather than setting yourself up for failure, right? When you can check off that box, whether that be mentally or if you've got some sort of a physical journal or something that you're filling out to help keep you on track, you're going to feel really good about it. But when the expectation is that you check 7 boxes and you only get 2, well, where does that leave you?
Yeah. Speaking of checking boxes, anyone who's watching and watching,
shameless.
The shameless plug there for the MTMM, the wellness and goal setting calendar that we've got living out. But those kind of ideals are what really wanted us to produce something like that, was where we could remind people that it is the fundamentals that are going to carry you through, and that consistent applications of the bare minimum and the basics, drinking enough water, eating a little bit more vegetables, making better choices when it comes to nutrition, and just moving at all they do lead up to those big changes.
And that's, we highly advocate some sort of tracking, some sort of reflection. We talked recently about macro tracking and how that's a tool for reflection, right? Habit trackers are the exact same thing. You've just got to find that medium that speaks to you. I'm a pen and paper person. I've got like 6 different agendas. So something like the MTMM calendar is right up my alley, right? I like to be able to physically check those things off. But I think that setting yourself some sort of a tool for reflection, whatever that may be, is really going to help you move towards your goals, because otherwise it kind of just becomes a general mishmash of, oh yeah, I'm going to do better, instead of having really specific goals. Like, I'm going to eat 4 servings of 5 grams of veggies, or 4 cupful servings a day, whatever.
Yeah. When you make the basics your bare minimum, and I guess too, the challenge is going to be that you are going to start doing things differently, and habits aren't necessarily good or bad. They're just what we're falling into doing often, right? So what we do want to start to encourage people is becoming to be consciously aware of what you are doing when it surrounds, whether it be your attitude towards movement, or the things that you're preparing yourself to eat, or how late you're staying up at night, like all those basics, and trying to make those a little bit more serving in nature. I think one thing that I found helpful with clients is when we actually define what is motivation, right? And I think so much, regardless of lockdown or not, we have this idea inherently that motivation is something that's going to come along and pick us up and carry us. And it's, if I use the analogy of it's like waiting for the bus. When you're sitting at the stop, waiting for this bus that's magically going to come along and take you to where you want to go, and it's not coming, ironically, what happens? You start walking, right? If the bus isn't coming and you start walking, what happens? The bus starts to come. So I think understanding that motivation is not what's going to carry you to where you want to be, but something that you actually have to start doing in order to self-propel, that this is a really good way to start that motivation in the right direction, is by doing the basic applications.
Yeah, and kind of like your bus analogy, I often talk about motivation being a bit of a hamster wheel, and it can run both ways, right? But by drinking the water and getting adequate sleep, eating your veggies, eating your protein, all of those things start to move that hamster wheel forward. And sooner rather than later, it's going to be really starting to spin when you start feeling a little bit better, right? We often talk about, in terms of nutritional interventions and change, first you feel it, then you see it, then you hear it. As in, people are, oh, you're doing something different, like you're looking really good, you're looking really vibrant, gaining muscle mass, whatever it is. Once you start making those changes and you actually feel, oh, this is energy, this is what it's like to feel good. Now I actually want to go for that run. I want to go to the gym, instead of it's something I have to do. It's something that I need to do to check off my list. I feel like I've got something to give. And once you get that fun and that play element back in your physical movement, now you're really going to want to start spinning that hamster wheel.
Yeah, I think for us, particularly as CrossFitters and Olympic weightlifters, I've more missed the gym because I've missed the 10,
talking
15.
To someone that's not.
Yeah, exactly right. Or the 30 or 40 different people that you get to see in a day and in your classes. And yes, I've missed training, and I've missed lifting heavy weights and doing muscle ups and the things that we haven't been. I don't think I've done a pull up really since because we don't have a bar at home since the lockdown. So I think that just going and putting yourself back in the environment that, like you said, it is fun, it is enjoyable. You do get a little bit of that social interaction with people that you're used to seeing that you haven't seen. You're going to, that is that momentum. That is what's going to carry you through getting back, into the workouts. And I think when getting back to activity after long periods of hiatus, there's 2 important things to keep in mind. The first is, of course, it's going to hurt, right? It's going to hurt because you haven't done it for so long, right? But I think in that, you also need to have realistic expectations of where things are at, right? Now, if you haven't had access to a whole lot of gym equipment over the last 18 months, or, sporadic access to equipment, don't go in there trying to snatch your lifetime 1RM on, day one.
And then be disappointed
when you don't, and then start questioning whether Olympic lifting is really for you anyway, right? And I know at Blackburn, the feedback, like I know the members are keen to get back into getting under heavy bars and things like that. But I think that, the conversations need to be the first month back, the first couple of weeks back at least, the numbers don't matter. What we're actually doing and what we're more focused on is reconditioning those motor patterns more so than because that's really where a lot of the strength...
progressively loading those joints that haven't been loaded.
Right? So, I mean, there would be nothing worse than coming out of 18 months injury, 18 months lockdown, only to then put yourself, 8 or 10 weeks back out of the gym because you've hurt your back or you've hurt your knee or your shoulder complaints because you're doing a movement that you haven't practiced for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 months, 5 years, like whatever it might be.
Yeah. So put yourself in a position where you can get back and stay back.
Yeah.
Right. And likewise, just like we wouldn't jump under, say, like a max lift on day one, if you're going in underfueled, if you haven't been focusing on your nutrition, if you haven't been drinking your water, if you haven't been doing all of those good things, now's a really good time to start trying to bring those habits back into your life because they do make such a big difference. Hydration especially is a huge one.
Yeah.
You're so much more susceptible to not only injury, but you're also going to feel a heck of a lot worse if you're not adequately hydrated, and your heart rate, which is already gonna be challenged, goes shooting up in the first 10 minutes, or the first few minutes of the warm-up even.
Yeah.
And thermally you're incredibly hot, right? Because you're dehydrated. So just focusing on those things for the next 2 weeks before the gym doors open is actually going to make it a much smoother transition for you.
Yeah. I think similarly to the activity, if you've been pretty loose on the nutrition front, again, like we're not saying you have to go from ordering Uber Eats every night to like super regimented weighing and measuring and tracking everything that you're eating. But if you have been a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Indulgent over a consistent period of time, maybe, water is a really great one to start because it's the easiest nail to hit with the hammer, right? But then it's little things like just start cooking a little bit more of your own food or increasing your veggie intake. Like just worry more about those foundational implements rather than the big, details.
I would say, in addition, start working on weaning off those highly inflammatory foods. So those processed foods, those hydrogenated oils, trans fats, sugars, any of that stuff that comes in the like really good takeaway, start weaning yourself off that so that you're re-entering the gym less systemically inflamed as well.
Yeah.
Right?
The one thing, not the one thing, but I guess one thing that often comes up when starting to make some of those changes, particularly nutritionally, like I always equate cravings to the nutritional equivalent of DOMS, right? Like when you take in a lot of time off activity and you start to move, you're going to be sore. When you've been having a little bit of dessert or that little bit of chocolate or those kind of lollies or whatever it is every night for dessert, when you sit down on the couch to get your Netflix in, you are going to start to notice. Yeah, you're going to start to notice. And the interesting thing with those cravings a lot of the time is not necessarily that we're physically addicted, but it's become that habit. We've become almost Pavlovian dog, esque of I finished dinner and already I'm starting to salivate just thinking or knowing that I've got that something sweet or something, to kind of, as part of my routine. It's really that breaking of that particular habit in general, right?
And I think with that too, again, many of us like to take an all or nothing approach. And so it's cold turkey and that lasts for a couple of days and you break and it's disastrous. And so, it might not be an appropriate approach for everyone, but certainly trying to swap out those items for something a bit different. So, trying to swap out that chocolate for a little bit of like high protein yogurt or the lollies for some fruit, something like that. Of course, it's not the same. But if you start building in those habits over time, you're really going to start looking forward to that fruit, right?
Yeah.
It is, your taste buds are going to change and it's not as drastic and let's say nothing fun ever.
So for anyone that does follow me or is being coached by me at the moment, our big thing is the diet jelly snakes, and it's things like that what we're talking about. So we if you've been sitting on the couch for 18 months, don't make your first run back a 10K run. If you haven't picked up a barbell in 6 months, don't make your first session back a maxed out back squat. If you haven't been paying attention to your diet, don't try to strip the bottom out all at once, but just start to make those little tiny tweaks and changes that will amount to big changes over time.
100%.
Yeah. You've got to be pretty excited. You started your rehab plans and getting back into the gym and everything else.
Yeah, I've been benching every session.
Yeah.
No, I am really excited. I'm really stoked to get back. I feel like I mean, maybe lockdown was a blessing in disguise for me personally, because it allowed me to really focus on the rehab and let the cortisone do its thing. And hopefully now we're rebuilding back out of it. I've just got to take a dose of my own medicine and not go full Labrador the second the gym opens, and try and knock off 10, grill wads all at once, but actually stick to the program. So that's my big challenge.
Have you found that, like coming back from postpartum, has that been similar to coming back from injury or hiatus in the past, or has it been much more challenging, I guess, because even like we sort of spoke before off air that, this might be the perfect time with your rehab to be doing the creatine cycle, but obviously there's flow-on effects to what you're eating with Matea.
Mm-hmm.
So are there more similarities or more differences when you're coming back from a period of hiatus from postpartum rather than from injury or lockdown?
I don't know. I think that this particular injury, and for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, I've got really bad pubic symphysis dysfunction and osteitis pubis from that pregnancy. We're 14 months postpartum now. So it is the longest injury I've ever had to work through. It is the most debilitating injury I've ever had to work through, because when your pelvis is messed up, there's very little you can do aside from seated strict press, which I've been doing for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's the longest and most extreme injury I've ever had to work my way back from. The most limiting, but also there's been things like the hormonal influences. I'm still breastfeeding, and so there are changes that are occurring that are not making that rehab easier. Likewise, I'm still breastfeeding, so there's some things that maybe potentially would have helped a little bit that I can't be taking. And then there's also baby-related injuries, which I thought this was the biggest load of crap before I had Matea. And I really apologize to anyone that may have felt that for me. But holding the baby, carrying the baby all day, especially now that the baby is, over 10 kilos and likes to be carried on my hip, breastfeeding and being like real jacked up, we co-sleep and co-sleeping. And so the kind of secondary injuries, tightness and balances, things that have come up have definitely complicated it. So it is different. And then obviously the biggest difference is the actual time that you can devote to both the rehab and getting into the gym, right? That's been the hardest. Yesterday we had me, up on the Concept 2 erg bike trying to read a textbook, and we had to put me in a cage because Matea was just like, I want mom and I want her now. To just scream for 45 minutes. And so I just had to put on my headphones while you copped it. But those are the things that make it challenging as well. So I think for anyone who is kind of working through stuff like that, I feel you, it's difficult. But everyone's rehab is difficult.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I guess there's two things that you sort of mentioned there. Firstly, it's an added degree of difficulty when access to practitioners has been so limited, especially here in Melbourne, which hasn't made things any easier. But two, and you kind of jokingly said before that you've been doing a lot of bench press and shoulder press, but I think what that really is saying is it speaks to the fact that if we have those habits and that discipline, that this is, and I know you still identify as an athlete, and even as specifically an Olympic weightlifter, not being able to squat, you kind of be in a position where you've got every excuse to, woe is me, I'm never going to get back to what I was. And that's kind of the end of the story. But having that habit of like, we're an active household, we're trying to set an example of regular activity, for our daughter and for our community, that you find a way to work on something, to better something. There's that old expression that like a shoulder injury is the universe's way of telling you it's time for a squat cycle, right? There's always something that you can be working on at some level. It's just sometimes we have to dig a little deeper and ask ourselves, well, what is the true motivation for me wanting to work out?
Yeah.
I think we've seen that across the board, you know, with lockdowns and things like that. A lot of our client community are that recreational high level athlete that, you know, we spend a lot of time preparing them for competitions and getting them ready. And what happens when all of a sudden there's nothing to prepare for? We've been able to have some of those conversations about, well, why are you active? Why do you dedicate so much of your time to paying attention to why you eat what you eat and why you prioritize your sleep and why you're in the gym? And fundamentally, if you're wanting to be a person that is physically strong and mentally resilient and looks after themselves and sets that example, then you find ways to work around injuries, or you find ways to work around lockdowns, or you find ways just to get in something. Doesn't matter to what degree.
And I think it's really easy to lose that in lockdown. I think a lot of people have, and I definitely, if you have it, you're not alone. And I felt that, and there's been periods where my training has been less, and so I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. But I also think that if you are someone who can relate to that, probably feeling a little bit differently internally. You're probably not feeling completely like yourself, like you've lost a piece of yourself. I know for me that was definitely exponentiated by that whole postpartum period. But the really nice thing is that once you start integrating these things again, you know, especially in Melbourne, it's getting sunny. So even though we've got 2 weeks to go back to the gym, you get that little bit of a workout in it. And after, when the endorphins hit, it's like, that's it. Like, that's me. I feel that. I love that feeling. I identify with that. I feel a little bit more like myself. And that's a really cool thing to bring back. And so, okay, maybe I'm going to go do that 15-minute workout again the next day. Right.
Yeah.
And you start to feel a little bit more like yourself and a little bit connected, and you gain back something that you've lost, because that feeling doesn't just go away. We just kind of forget it. Right. So if you've fallen off a little bit, it doesn't mean that you've fallen off forever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is you know, one squat session doesn't make you, you know, necessarily a highly successful athlete, but you know, 1 month or 1 year out of the gym also doesn't take away that sort of athlete that is inside you too, like yearning to get out. I think my other takeaway tip, you know, if you are getting back into things and these are new habits that you're trying to create, you need to do things that keep that front of mind, that you're constantly reminded that this is something you're working on, especially initially. So if you're just trying to get a 30-minute walk in, but you're someone who like, oh shit, I forgot to go on my walk today, putting it into your calendar, like making space in your day for something that you're trying to make a priority, especially in our like working from home kind of environment that we're in now. You know, I think for many people, it feels more that we've been sleeping at work rather than that we're working from home. And that kind of difference between what's work and what's home time has become very, you know, blurred and grayed. And you know, even for us, working from home predominantly, it's been exaggerated even more so for lockdowns. And it's, you know, if you're not putting time in your calendar to work on these things for you, it's not going to happen. There's always more things to do. There's always something else that could be done. But I think getting to the point mentally where you realize that whether or not you go for your half an hour walk or your 20-minute workout or your hour-long gym session, whatever it is, the work will be there when you get back. Yeah. It will, you know, it's waiting for you. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I know, especially for us with Matea, it's every night we have to have a quick discussion. All right, what's plans tomorrow? What do you need to get done? What gym workout do you have? Do you need to be in the gym? Do you need to be in the house? Where can we fit that in? And it's a negotiation about, okay, you get this time, I get this time. Because if we don't have that conversation, there's no way we're just going to be able to, on the fly, figure it out.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is being present and you know, if you're setting your day up in your calendar with, you know, this is what I'm going to work out and this is my break and this is kind of this project or task that I have to get done. make sure you're doing only the thing that you're intending to do in that time. So if it's your time to work out for half an hour, work out for half an hour. If it's your time to go for a walk, just go for a walk. If it's your 10 minutes where you meditate, just meditate. Because I think, again, if you're trying to do a workout, but you're still sending emails, you're not really getting either done. And I think that actually makes things more stressful than less stressful. And it's kind of like, if you have to work or you're working, what are you doing here in the gym? And vice versa. So I think, make the time more front of mind, be more deliberate in putting the time aside to do those things that you're trying to work on. But when that time comes, focus on doing that thing. I think it's one of those things, when it can be quite daunting when you've had a long time out of the gym and you think, I'm not at my fittest and I'm not at my strongest, but
neither is anyone else right now.
Exactly right. And I think I couldn't even tell you the last time I walked into the gym and felt like I'm at the strongest and my fittest, right? And I think that's the beauty of Olympic lifting, is that you get humbled by the bar. The beauty of CrossFit is that, the fitter you get, the harder it is. So I don't think that, you don't necessarily need to build yourself back up, to going back to class. If you miss classes, like, go in there, but you have to leave the expectations of where you were the last time you walked into the gym at the door, right? And that doesn't mean that your best is behind you. It just means that it's not going to help anyone if you go in there expecting to be where you were 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago.
If you haven't been there.
If you haven't been there, right, for whatever reason.
So small, bite-sized chunks.
While we're talking about tracking and keeping things front of mind, if you have been following us, you know that we've got the goal setting and wellness calendar, which has been released. Anyone listening to this live now, pre-sale is available for 1 more week. Maggie's going to kill me if I get that wrong. 1 more week.
The 28th,
Yeah. I'll drop a link in the description. So if you're looking for a tool that has basically all the premise of everything that we've spoken about to help get you back on and keep you on, regardless of lockdowns or whatever else is going in the world, fingers crossed 2022, maybe we'll just have a bit more a bit more relaxed. I don't want to say slow or relaxed year, because I feel like that's what we were hoping for in 2020. But if you feel like you need something that you can visualize and simply just cross and check off, we have put together a resource for you. I'll put a link for that at the website. Makes great Christmas presents as well. And as always, as coaches, if you're looking for someone to hold you personally accountable and customize something a little bit more directly for you and your needs, whatever they may be, inside or outside the realm of athletic performance, then you can always send us an email or reach out on multiple platforms.
That sounds good.
Thank you for joining me.
Anytime.
I'm enjoying these chats, 2 in a row.
Watch out.
New habit.
We're on fire.
New habit forming.
All right.
Thanks, Bobs.
Bye.
Lovely. We hope you guys enjoyed that. Our first live.